Here, I'll get started. Hi everyone, my name is Sydney. I'm the author and coordinator of the book. So I'm thrilled that you chose to spend your evening here with us for an author event. Very exciting, we're very excited. So, if you have fun tonight and you're thinking I'd like to do this again, we have plenty of other authors coming up. We have our Children's Book Festival kicking off the first week in May as well. We have a couple midnight release parties if you're into Taylor Swift. We have a midnight listening party. If you're an adult, you're into Emily Henry and rom-coms, we're going to have a 13 going on 30 midnight release party for the new releases. Be sure you're following us online. We've got lots coming up. If you have to leave for any reason, particularly to take a phone call, you can just go down the stairs that you came up and do what you got to do. Come back up. We have restrooms downstairs. I believe that's all the housekeeping things for me. We're going to be doing a signing line after the event and after we're downstairs. The authors go first, so they're there to sign your books, and then when we let you down, surprise, what just worked out for us. Alrighty, so that is enough chit-chat from me. Please let me give a very warm welcome to our guests this evening. We have two very special, very young authors. They're such inspirations to all of us. We have Bentley Scurlock and Jason Liao. And we have our Melissa Long. So let's put your hands together.
Thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for braving the traffic and finding the parking spot. I had a bit of a challenge myself. I have interviewed many authors over the years, but never authors that are teenagers. And when I was reading the book, I was like, this is by a teenager? It's so impressive. So first of all, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
So there's a breakdown in the book of 51 CEOs, entrepreneurs, people at the top of their industries. And there's one in particular that kind of stuck out to me, and that's a young lady who started a business based on something she came up with when she was just 7, and it's a candy business. And similar to you, you were 7 years old, 8 years old when you became entrepreneurs. So how does someone at that very young age develop that mindset? And I'm kind of interested from not only the perspective of interviewing this young lady, but yourselves. Anybody can answer.
Sure. So I think that, at least from my personal journey, one of the things that really stood out to me when I was starting my business was the process, not just of selling the product, but it started out with me just making the product. I would my business I started when I was 7, selling hand soaps, and then I later added polymer clay pens as well. And I first just made those soaps for myself, and it was really something that I enjoyed for the creativity of the process. And then later on, it struck me, I could sell this because I like it so much, and I think that others would too. And I think that for kids especially, that sort of like realization can often be the spark for a business, that they might see a product that they themselves enjoy, and then from there reach out and say, I think others would like that too. How can I market it, get that, and sell that to other people? And I think that that's one of the reasons that inspiration and access to other entrepreneurs is so important.
And I'll just add a little bit about that. I love that you mentioned that story. She actually entered into a bank, and while she was asking for a lollipop from the bank teller, her father said, no, you can't have one because it's bad.
I've done that before.
Yeah. And she just thought, well, why can't I, right? And I think that's the attitude that a lot of us young people, especially in Generation Z, and even younger than this, Generation Alpha as well, have that attitude of why can't we just think of a problem and find a solution. And when we really attack it, we go and start our own businesses like Finn and I have, and we also develop things in our own worlds, right? That's what really takes us to the next level, and I think that's what we can bring as future aspiring entrepreneurs.
That's a lesson not only for kids, for adults. If you're 25, 55, if you see something in the market that you think a problem you can solve, that's usually how people go into business for themselves. It's just atypical, perhaps, that a kid would develop this or a teenager would develop this. It reminds me of one of the stories you have in here of two brothers who started a business, and the title is, "Are you kidding?" And I get that title because people must have said that to you. Are you kidding? You're writing a book? Like, when you first started on this journey, did people take you seriously?
Some did and some didn't. I'll just say that cold emailing and doing starting with friends and friends of friends was a much better starting point for us to say, hey, these are some of the people that we know and maybe we're more familiar with. So our first interview actually was Ken Stern, a former CEO of NPR. And although we had this group around us, we had to quickly network and think on our feet of how could we reach out to new people and people that they knew. So really widening our connection from there and taking every opportunity to say, hey, even if you can't do this interview, do you know anybody that would be a good fit, right? And I think that when we took it from that standpoint, we had really everything to win and nothing to lose.
Adding on to what Jason said, I would say that in the beginning there were people who didn't take us seriously. I remember at one point one time we got a response from a CEO asking if it was a school project and asked for our parents' phone numbers. And that was, I think we laughed a little at that and just, then responded saying, no, we're doing this of our own initiative. And then, got a response. But I think that,
He or she might be reaching out now.
I think that through that, we learned what is really a fundamental entrepreneurial skill that so many of the people that we talk to also emphasize, which is the value of saying thank you and moving on when you receive a no, which all the entrepreneurs we talk to also received no's before they got their first yes. And then I think from that, it's also worth noting that it only takes one yes for you to get funding or for you to get a publisher. I also wanted to talk a little bit about we were lucky enough to have this book published by the Random House, which is obviously a huge publishing company. And that was something where we got lots of no's before we got the yes that became our publisher. But from that, we learned the value of persistence and grit for entrepreneurs, and also once we could say, when we were interviewing people, we could say, our book is being published by Penguin Random House, and that had an exponential effect on expanding our network, as Jason was mentioning, because it's hard not to take you seriously, no matter your age, if you're having a book published.
Well, it's no longer the school project.
Yes.
You touched on many topics, so I'd like to explore the writing process itself. The authors I've interviewed say it takes typically about 9 months, but they were solo authors. As co-authors, how long was your process? Did you go in a room together? Did you go in, like, the kitchen in your houses? Did you go in the park? Talk to me about the writing process.
I think that from a young age, we always have been doing that, just bouncing ideas off each other and just talking, whether it be in a kitchen or wherever it might be. I know garages are popular among entrepreneurial stories. But with that said, I would say that, yes, it was a case of just like sometimes it was in person, more often than not it ended up being online because, of course, this was during COVID. But we would definitely collaborate a lot in the process. I would say that it's taken 4 years for us, and I think that a huge part of that was simply that we had to connect with, and perhaps more difficult was finding a time that aligned with both our own school schedules and also finding a time to speak with these busy CEOs who only have so much time in their day. And I think that was a challenge which lengthened the process, and that was only made things more difficult because then we had to go back and some people changed jobs. And Random House, when we got the contract, we thought at that point we were done, but no, they asked us to go back and find a bunch more interviews, and then after that there was a year essentially of further editing and recording the audiobook and all these publicity and all these different steps. So it really was a long journey, just like starting a business is, which I felt that the processes mirror each other in a lot of ways.
And you just talked about length. Jason, talk to me about how the fact that you had to shave off a lot of information. It was originally 800 pages?
Yes.
How did you go to basically half of them?
Well, like, first of all, it wasn't simple. And like a lot of projects, process. There are many hands that, touch it in different ways, edit it in different ways before it finally gets to the product that we can hold now. And I think that's a credit to how many people have helped us along the way. So not only our parents, but each other. And then our editor at Random House. There's so many different pieces that have helped us in finding, sometimes where we might have said something extra, or finding ways to cut it down. So I think even though we took it from 800 to 400, and it was like losing a limb, it still came up to what we kind of envisioned, and kind of kept the core promise of what we wanted to bring readers on this book. So I think overall it still had its place intact.
We're talking a lot about entrepreneurs, and there's often that pivoting that goes on. It's interesting to hear that what you set out to do, you've accomplished despite several years of process, zillions of cooks in the kitchen, changing things, and then having to edit. So when you take a step back now and look at your final product, it's hard to not pat yourselves on the back and be very proud of yourself.
I would say that, yeah, there is this immense feeling of accomplishment, seeing the book in front of us, being at these events, and seeing people coming to these events to listen to us talk about our journey writing this book. And we are so grateful for all of those people for coming. But also, I feel like it really is the culmination of our efforts, particularly when we can see it in the hands of young readers who we hope will take that and be inspired by our book and maybe start businesses of their own. That's really our end goal, is inspiring and teaching the people of our age and even younger as to how they can do it and what they can do.
I'll just mention really quickly, I loved actually, I spoke yesterday in some school in Athens, Georgia, so not too far away from here. And I was super inspired by some of these kids because I asked them, what do you want to do when you grow up? And a lot of them, you might have expected, like scientists or astronaut. But a few of them were like, I want to start a business like my parents, right? And I think that was such an inspiring moment where it was like, these kids know that this is a possibility, that they have influence around them, where you're trying new things and you're incorporating this into all different aspects of your life. So I think this book as a roadmap will not only help them succeed in that, but just anything that they're really doing in life, and inspiring them to keep pushing and taking that entrepreneurial mindset.
It's often connected to mentoring, and woven throughout the book are tips about seeking a mentor, about what mentors have meant to people. What were some of your big takeaways about the importance of mentoring from the leaders you follow?
I would say that in many ways, mentorship is fundamental to entrepreneurship because it's something that entrepreneurship is not a journey that can be done alone, and that in addition to friends, coworkers and friends, there's so many people that goes into it, and I think that mentors are a fundamental part of that, you need to have someone who you can look up to who can show you that entrepreneurship is a path out there. You need someone who you can look at and say, that person, I want to be like them when I grow up. And then I think that was what we wanted to do with the book, was show a wide array of entrepreneurs who, from every background imaginable, who had started their businesses in all different ways, at all different ages, and show so that people reading it could find someone that is like them, that thinks like them, who they can see themselves in, and who can then inspire them to start a business, because that's really what it's all about, and that's where the inspiration comes from.
In the acknowledgement section, end of the book, you thank myriad of people, but among them your mentors. How did you find your mentors? Did they find you?
I think it was a combination of both. In some ways, they were like teachers, right? So you find them in places where you're, I guess, kind of forced to be, but in other ways, it's like they also find you. Like, I think in a way, this is something that's applicable to any entrepreneur's journey, is that there is luck involved, right? Finding a mentor is kind of a lucky experience. You're at the right place at the right time. But then again, you also have to be at those places, show up every day, show up at those places so that you can find those people around you. And just like you find those people, you find opportunities. So it takes a lot of persistence, it takes grit, but it also takes perseverance.
talked about showing up. Speaking of showing up, there's a gentleman who's featured in the book, which showed up tonight. Mr. Gloria in the back. Is that an intense pressure knowing he's right there?
If anything, I'd say it makes it a lot easier because we did have an entrepreneur with us that was featured in yesterday night, and I think even though they were on stage, sharing the stage with us, having a confidence is even more inspiring because it shows that they're showing up still for us, even when they showed up for the Zoom call. Now they're showing up for us during this part of the process, and maybe even later on in our future careers. So it's really heartwarming and super grateful that they were able to show up tonight. So I want to say thank you so much.
And Lou, if you have any questions in a little bit, we will open the floor. They asked you questions. It will be your turn if you'd like. We'll also open the floor to questions if you have questions that I don't ask tonight, so please get those ready as well. When I'm reading the book, well, before I opened the book, I wasn't sure what to expect. And when I'm reading the book, I notice it's easily, kind of a marketing term today, but digestible. If you want to read the Q&A, you can do that, the top tips. How did you design it this way? Were you told this is the way it must be?
I would say that really we designed it with our generation in mind, that we wanted Down to Business to be by Gen Z, for Gen Z, and Gen Alpha. And with that in mind, we suited it to what we thought of as our flavor of media consumption, if you will. That Gen Z has grown up in a society that expects things immediately. We have been on social media from a young age, and I think that from that, perhaps books have taken the back seat somewhat in terms of a method of learning. We thought that writing a book would be the ideal means of showing these people because it was a compilation, a mythology of so many different backgrounds that we felt would be the best format for it. But also we wanted to tailor it to what we thought would be how Gen Z would want to read a book. And with that in mind, we had key takeaways at the end. We had quotes that we pulled out from the book and put in little boxes along with definitions for various terms. We had introductions at the beginning, and I think that from the format that we did, we tried to make it above all in a easily parsable format that was accessible to all readers, and in the hopes that anyone can pick up that book and learn from it, whether they start from the first interview or whether they go and read about New Gloria on page 100 or 200 or something. Like it really is something that you can read however you best read, and that was what we wanted to do.
I'll just go back to your original point where it's like, wow, I can't believe this teens wrote it. It's like we picked some of the parts that interested us most in the interviews. I think that's what gave it a different approach. That like, you don't have to start at the beginning and you don't have to start at the end. You can start anywhere in the middle and really get something out of it. So I think kind of taking a lot of inspiration from what we like. So that's why I think it was such a great way to kind of deliver that to our young readers.
Talked about social media, and some people love it, some people can't stand it, some people say it's ruining our society, but there are some significant problems with young people, teenagers, and social media, and yet, it's escaping me who said it, but talk about how you can use it to your benefit, especially in an entrepreneurial situation. What is your relationship with social media? Obviously you embrace it, certainly LinkedIn. It has a real educational impact. It can bolster your book. What are your thoughts on social media and young people?
To start, I would say simply that it was something that we wanted to know more about ourselves in starting the journey of writing this book. That for that reason, we asked every single person we interviewed whether they thought social media had a positive or negative impact on society, because we wanted to gather a wide array of opinions. We wanted to talk to people who thought it was ruining our society and people who thought that it was the best thing since sliced bread. And I think that from that we learned in marketing our book and using social media, and from the people that we interviewed, that social media is at its core complex. It's not good or bad. It has benefits in entrepreneurship and in life, and it has negatives to accompany them. And I think that from one hand, I feel like there are real risks when it comes to overconsumption of media, things like doom scrolling and our sometimes unhealthy relationship with the news, and also with privacy and keeping our data safe, that there are some real concerns that we need to consume social media mindfully. But at the same time, it's also been a tool of profound connection, and it's brought people closer together just as often as it has divided them, in the sense that, like, without social media, without the internet, we wouldn't have been able to speak with people. This book would not exist without those resources and tools. And so with that in mind, I would say that really the key approach, according to both the people we talk to and us, is balance.
And I'll just add one example. You just mentioned privacy, and one of the people on there actually works for Ping, so one of the leading cybersecurity networks. And his name was Richard Bird, who shared an analogy for social media. It's like a hammer. So a hammer can be used to hammer in a nail, which means it's a good use. But it can also be used to attack someone. So there's good and bad uses. It's just like anything else.
I think I had a moment where I forgot I was interviewing teenagers. Something brought me back to the fact that you are so young and yet so accomplished and so poised, and your depth of knowledge and command of the language is so mind-blowing. So you met at 6. How did you meet? What do you guys do for fun? That kind of thing.
I remember this day perfectly. It was actually like rainy, cloudy, nothing like the weather we're experiencing right now. And Kim and Finn were actually walking home.
Kim's mom.
Yeah, Kim is Finn's mom. And me and my mom opened the door to go check our mail. And then we saw each other. We're like, oh shit, I didn't know there were other kids in the neighborhood because we had just moved in. So that's kind of how we met, and we both shared and bonded for our love over Pokemon cards. And then later on, we experienced that we love money. So, whether it was random business ideas like shoveling snow, one, for example, is a lemonade stand. We thought, why have a lemonade stand just in one place when we could put it on a wagon and wagon it around to every single door and see if people wanted lemonade in their homes. So that's what we did for a few weekends, knocking on people's doors until we had received some negative comments and then had to stop. So we've been through a lot together, and we do a lot of fun things. So I think just having that laugh and then having those kind of great moments together has helped us with serious process of our life as well.
I agree with everything Jason said. To share another funny anecdote, there was one time in that lemonade stand when we accidentally put salt instead of sugar in the lemonade. That did not go over well, but luckily we noticed quickly before it fell too many times. Yes, one was perhaps too many. But nonetheless, I would say, to talk about what you mentioned, the second part of your question about what we do for fun, I would say that there is some extent to us, entrepreneurship is fun, that we do enjoy learning, and that is something that we make a part of our lives. And I would say that also there's a place for lots of other hobbies and forms of relaxation. For instance, I love to rock climb. That is my primary sport, which I do 3 times a week, actually. And Jason mentioned Pokemon cards. We actually both compete competitively still in Pokemon card tournaments, so that's a frequent activity on weekends. Also, I wanted to mention reading as well, because I think that, as any great writer would say, reading is equally important, and that's one of the main things that I do with my free time. Is I particularly love to read fantasy novels, so more often than not you'll see me sitting with a book when I'm doing just about anything. So that would be another thing which when combined, which probably increased even my passion for writing as well, was reading from a young age. So I would say that those are all encompassed in the sort of sphere of what do we do for fun.
I need to make sure I understand, because I'm not familiar with What happened on the weekend?
We compete in tournaments.
But how does it turn into a Pokemon card?
You have, I mean, it's a complicated thing to explain, just like, social media. I was just doing this, helping out my mom with social media. But anyways, it's a common thing, right? Where we have something that's like, I guess, new to us, and then I guess adapt kind of quickly. Like, my dad even was like, how do you know how to use that iPad thing? And I was like, I don't know. So, I mean, to answer your question though, we've been collecting for a really long time, and then you build a deck and you go in and compete. It's just like any other, I guess, sports competition, but of the mind and not brain. So that's a quick rundown of our hobby.
If I could tie it into entrepreneurship quickly. So actually we also do a lot of like buying and selling and trading cards as well, and which makes sense considering what is called a trading for a reason. But it also, I think that passion, as much as it was a product of my love for all art in all its forms, just as I made soap and just as now I weave my product and my art forms. But I would say that it's equally true. Pokemon was just like any painting that carries value, that taught us financial literacy to some extent at a young age, which we did carry over.
I'll open the floor to questions in one moment. I just have one more right now. You mentioned reading a lot. Not surprised to hear you, voracious readers. Any reading recommendations?
That would be my probably the most difficult question. But
Down to business.
I would say, as far as favorite novels, I'm just going to go out and start by saying that if you haven't read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and Good Omens, that you should probably go do that. I saw they have Good Omens downstairs if you're interested. But I would say that's as much as much a personal preference as anything. That everyone likes different kinds of books. I would say that yes, down to business, but anything really. Anything fantasy related is what I tend to focus on. And funnily enough, I'm actually working on another book right now that I'm currently around a little over 70,000 words into my second novel, or at least the first of many, many drafts. But that is going to be a high fantasy novel. So that's going to be good use as well when it comes to what I hope will be my career.
Yeah, I read on a wide kind of spectrum. I'd say on one end you have like things like Crazy Rich Asians, so that's the one that was recently made into a movie. And then I guess more of a triangle, and then on another point you have like Harry Potter, there's some classics. And then I'm also really interested in history, so I've also been reading this book called Just Mercy, which is written by a New York University professor on social justice in the South. So that was kind of a recent read for me as well. But I read kind of like everything.
Not surprised to hear that. What questions can I take from the audience? And don't be shy, whether you are 6 years old or 60 plus years old. Questions are welcome. And it's usually that first person who has the grit and the perseverance, the entrepreneur, who stands up last. And if not, I'll ask another question because I always answer questions. Yes?
What are you going to do with the other 400 pages you cast away? Are you going to write a second helper?
We talk about this all the time. I'd say this is like a common like car ride. We're like, what would we name our second book? And we're like, Back to Business. Still in Business. But anyways, so
Sometimes involves the Star Wars titles.
Star Wars titles. But anyways, I'd say the other 400 pages are still deep in our hearts. We love the words that they said, and they have not gone into the trash bin yet until our Google Drive runs out of space. But yes, we still have them, and hopefully we'll write another one.
Yes, Luke.
First of all, congratulations, fellas. Social media. So when you interviewed everybody in the book, did you find a generational difference as far as social media? Because now with this TikTok thing and the generation that is using TikTok to get their news is obviously against the ban, because that's what TikTok's obviously telling them. And the comparison with the hammer, hammers don't have algorithms. So it's a blunt instrument. So the guy works in tech, fair play. So anyway, did you guys find anything generationally as you looked and said, like I'm a boomer, right? So I got a pretty set opinion on social media, but did you find that people who've grown up on social media like this is the best thing ever and I don't know anything else?
I would say that as that the younger people we interviewed definitely viewed social media as more essential or inextricable from their lives, that they viewed it as not so much a tool as a part of life. But I would say that in general, perhaps it's something to do with the fact that we interviewed entrepreneurs, but I think that generally people tended to see both the positives and negatives of entrepreneurship, no matter their age or generation. That I think that's something that you somewhat have to do in entrepreneurship, because social media obviously has become such a huge part of so many people's lives at this point. But also as an entrepreneur, it's effectively impossible to run a business without social media, which means you have to get to know it. And I think that from that you can more easily ascertain both the positives and the negatives, no matter your age.
Yeah, there's a default buy-in, right? To your point, if you're an entrepreneur, you can only go around the neighborhood so many times with the lemonade, and then you realize I put this up on Instagram, and lose a lot of product, right? And then when I get access to the algorithms, I know when they're going to need lemonade. I don't know what kind of lemonade they want. I don't know when they go on type 2 diabetes medication. That's why it's not a hammer. It's just not a hammer, right? It's just not. But anyway, well done, guys.
I'll get to another audience question in a moment, but first I want to mention the generations. That was really big for you in writing the book, that even though you're catering to certain demographics right now, but you've all 5 generations in this book. Why was it so important to you?
I think that one of the core things that we wanted to show was that you can start a business at any age. And I think part of that was talking to people from every age to show that entrepreneurship is something that it works in practice as well as in theory. That if we had talked to 51 people from Gen X, that I think that the point may not have hit home so hard that you can be an entrepreneur at any age. It's easy to say even kids can be entrepreneurs, but I think it's a lot more powerful to say that if you've interviewed someone in your book who started their business when they were 16 or 7. So I would say that really it was both. It was proof of concept, but it was, to use a business term, but it was also simply something that we wanted to gather a diverse array of opinions as well, and that necessarily encompasses age as a factor of diversity.
And I'll just add on really quickly to the diversity point. It wasn't just age. We also interviewed people that were men and women. We interviewed people from all genders, and then of course all over the world. Right? We mentioned Beijing to Boulder, all the way over to Australia. So to cover all the bases really and show that no matter where you're from, no matter what your background, it's still possible.
Right, back to the audience for questions. We have a 7-year-old with a question. Go ahead.
What course do you recommend for younger kids?
On the list, and starting from number 2, I love Harry Potter, as I mentioned. I've actually been to Harry Potter World a few too many times for my age, but I think that if I get too old, then I might not be able to go. So that's why I love Harry Potter. I guess that's a staple for me.
Yes, I've read the series.
Many times.
Yes.
Do you find something new with each read?
Yeah. I think it's partially just the fact that I love the world, I love the story. I'm somewhat less fond of the third, but that's another story. I would say that yes, it was something which it was one of the first fantasy books that I ever read that kind of sparked an interest. And so yes, I would say that I do find something new.
I really wish I could give like a not obvious and like a Googleable answer, but I'll have to think on it.
Well, thinking back to your 6, 7, 8-year-old self, I mean, people always say, what advice would you give yourself? What advice would you give little Jason, little Then, in terms of what you encountered over the last decade, essentially, in terms of growing up and trying new things, and trying really bold things. Going to a prestigious online high school, becoming really involved in your school, having the nerve to write a book. Like, what's your advice to the little kids?
I'll start off by saying, like, take risks. This was one thing from one of the interviews that we did. He was also a Chinese entrepreneur, and in Chinese, the word risk means danger, and it also means reward. So without a danger, there cannot be a reward. And I think that that's such an important part to know, important lesson to know when you're starting off really young, because a lot of these entrepreneurs wish that they had started earlier, wish that they had tried something before it was too late. And a lot of them did end up learning from that lesson, and once they tried, they ended up seeing success along the way. So I'd say take the risks. I think we did with this book, and then it showed, and it's been proven. So I think just doing that more often with all the things.
And the second piece of what Jason said, adding on to it, is that in the process of taking those risks, you're going to fail. That it's not, you shouldn't expect to see an immediate overnight success, simply because immediate overnight success does not exist in entrepreneurship, no matter how much social media or the internet might paint it as so. But I would say that you're always going to be met with those no's that believe are met with the yeses. For instance, one of the people we talked to, Claire Coder, got 86 no's before she got her first yes when searching for venture capital venture capital firms to invest. And I would say that from that story was not a lone example. It was no outlier. And I would say that from that you can learn that it takes grit and resilience, and that's something that you have to learn as a part of the process, but also that if you don't give up and if you learn from those lessons, that failure can be an opportunity and even a necessity to succeed. And so I would say it's making the best use of that as an opportunity rather than as a judgment.
What other questions are there?
After interviewing all the people that you did, ones that read the book or didn't make it to the book, was there one in particular that just blew you away and just, wow, this is just unbelievable?
So that's such a difficult question. I want to say all of them because every single person we talked to was amazing, that they had done so much and we were so impressed and inspired by them all. But if I had to choose one or two, I would say personal bias on my part when I mentioned the CEO and founder of Outlaw Soaps, Danielle Vincent, which you might have heard. Soaps, yes, it's a soap company which is near and dear to my heart, being someone who sold soaps for my first real business. And I would also mention Lou Loria, of course, and I would mention Jenny's Ice Cream, Jenny Brittenbauer, who we interviewed simply because that's my favorite ice cream company. So that was such an amazing interview because, and that was true of several of the companies where we ourselves were consumers of the product, and that made talking to them all the more special.
Yeah, I'll say Michael Krakris, who was the founder of a company you probably haven't heard of. It's called Deliver. And the reason you probably haven't heard of it is that it was bought out incredibly quickly because it was such a great idea. And what I loved about him was that in his quote was actually a manifestation from his high school graduation. And that quote was, if an opportunity doesn't come knocking, build a door. And I think that his attitude going into college, which was when he actually started the business, by the way, had an immense impact on what he could actually do and the limits to which he pushed to actually develop the company. And to share what that was, it was actually a competitor for Amazon. Right? So they actually started reaching out to businesses and stores that Amazon wasn't reaching, and they made one of the top distribution companies. And they were quickly bought out by Shopify, now used by millions of businesses all over the world. So I'll just say that having that attitude going into your kind of years of college college and high school really helps, and having that self-confidence is
I'm glad you mentioned him because I enjoyed reading that he had such success after being rejected, as you've discussed, by both Facebook and Uber, and then he created his own company. So a little bit of rejection can sometimes propel you to success. Yes.
So that segues into how you segmented the book, which is kind of critical because you have candy, you have clothing, you have distribution. These are industries that are not new, and it's very tough to break in to those industries. And what was prevailing amongst those who, in ice cream and candy, to make it in those industries? Because that is very difficult.
they had to find their own niche. I'd say that one example, which is Mei Xu, and she started a candle making business, taking inspiration from walking into Bloomingdale's every day. And she was like, this clothing is so modern and new and fresh, but the home goods that I saw in Target weren't fresh. They were old, antique, they didn't seem like something that someone would want to put in their homes. So I think when she found that and had that own creative kind of, I guess, like inspiration or that spark, she took it to a whole nother level and then tested it out before, seeing its feasibility before trying to scale it up. So I'd say that no matter what the idea is, you have to make sure first it's kind of open and consumers are willing to buy it. And second, that it's unique and different and that consumers are liking it just in different ways. So, she saw this in this parallel with the clothing. So I'd say that even though there were candles that already existed, she still found a way to make it into the business.
And adding onto that, specifically that idea of finding a niche and specifically that word of idea, one of the people we interviewed actually said something, mentioned a piece of advice that I found interesting, which was that so many people put so much into the execution of a business, but don't put enough effort into coming up with an idea in the first place and testing that idea before you actually put everything and put those risks behind it. So I would also mention how important it is that an idea is just the first step of a process. Yes, it's the first step of a long journey, but I would say that despite that, it's worth putting your heart and soul into making sure that not only is that idea viable, but it's something that you are passionate about, that you can see succeed, because if you aren't passionate about it, then you'll never make it, because entrepreneurship, passion is so important to the process of really making it through the lows to get to the highs. And with that in mind, that was something that we wanted to do with Down to Business, was provide that passion and inspiration, help others, young entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, find their niche.
Laura?
Congratulations on it as well. But my question is there an entrepreneur who you would really love to interview that you haven't had a chance to interview, and why?
I'm blanking on his name, but I'd say the CEO of NVIDIA currently. Or actually, I was just discussing it in the car today, Sam Altman from OpenAI. I know it's a little bit of a controversial topic, right, AI, but I think that it takes these visionaries, these people like who were Steve Jobs of our last generation, to really open the door to new concepts that will change the way that we think, to change the way that our lives will actually operate. And these products are different from, maybe a small change in our lives, like, okay, this is a great water bottle, this is a great thing that I can consume, but this is going to change the way that I'm going to go about my day-to-day routine. And I think that's just almost like a fundamental difference in the way that I think some people think. So I'd say him.
To give another example, I would say there's an argument to be made that you can just say, like, Google or Apple or something huge just by virtue of it being huge. There's no denying that would have propelled our book forward to be able to say, we interviewed the CEO of Google. But I would say that if I were to choose one company that I feel like would have been amazing to interview, it would be the founder or CEO of Zoom. That Zoom as a company has contributed to, it's radically changed our lifestyle over the past 4 years in such a profound way that it shows I think part of what we really, in addition to simply making our book possible, it shows that what we really wanted to prove with our book was that you can do so much with entrepreneurship, and that while Generation Z and Generation Alpha as well, has so many looming problems at our feet, from climate change to racial justice to so many different causes that we want to make, in so many different ways in which we want to make our mark on the world, that we believe that entrepreneurship is the route to doing those, that entrepreneurship can fundamentally change the way our lives work. And I think Zoom is a testament to that, because really in a world that was struggling so much with COVID, that Zoom provided a modicum of normalcy, but also a completely different way of communication that I think has changed our society so much.
Okay. Sam Altman and Eric Yuan, both of you, if you're watching, please give us an interview. Please give us an interview.
Question. Oh, yes.
Would you guys ever want to interview somebody who's an entrepreneur where it didn't work out like they thought it was going to work out? Peloton's a good example. Boom during the pandemic, stock rocket ship right to the bottom now. You get a latte for the price of a share of Peloton, right? So, like, would there be anything that you guys would find interesting about meeting somebody who enjoyed the ride up, got sold, but then it cratered, like that whole experience? Because you guys are talking about the positive experience, and even getting rejected by VCs all these times, and finally you get your yes. What about that person that saw the success that was going to go on forever until it didn't?
I would say that our book is at its core an optimistic book about what you can do with entrepreneurship and how entrepreneurship can change the world. But with that said, with regards to failure, if I were to point to a specific thing that I would wish to show with an interview like that, it would be that one failure is not the end, that you can still not only rebuild that company from there, but you can start a new company, or you could even pivot, as entrepreneurs do, and use those entrepreneurial skills in any number of different careers. And I think that what might be interesting to me would be not to interview the CEO of Peloton right now, but to go back in 10 years and see what they've made of it, or where they've gone next. Because I think that I would be very interested to know that answer of what an entrepreneur can do after that failure. And I would say that failure is not the end.
For sure, you find out guys gave up too much control, they sold to the wrong people, or whatever the situation is. But yeah, there's a lot of learnings along the whole arc.
We've gone long in our conversation, not surprised considering all the fascinating things you have to say and the great questions. But I want you to have time to meet the authors downstairs and have our book signing. So it has been my pleasure to interview you. It has been my pleasure to have a conversation with you. You're very inspiring for young people and people in the audience, especially my little girls who are here. So thank you for coming down to Atlanta to talk about Down to Business. Congratulations. Ready?
Maybe.